Well, thank you, Diane. And I'm in particular very happy to, make sure your campaign becomes known internationally, because right now, where many people in the world are extremely concerned about the war danger and really think that nuclear war and global war could happen, many people are at complete despair about the United States. Because if you look at the mass media, it looks like a monolithic bloc of escalation, pressure on the so-called allies, which are more vassals these days. And generally, one does not hear that there is a real America, an America as it was meant, as a republic, as it was created by the founding fathers, as it continued to live with Lincoln, with FDR, with Kennedy. And therefore, to hear in the rest of the world that there is actually an American candidate and an American movement of different, groupings, but especially what you have demonstrated in your previous senatorial campaign is actually something which is strategically important, because I have talked over the years with many people around the world, including Russians, including Chinese, including other NATO member countries. And, for them to have an estimate, what is the United States? Is it a monolithic bloc only going in the direction of confrontation with Russia and now increasingly with China? Is a matter which goes into the analysis and into the decision-making of what to do. So don't think your campaign is just a national campaign inside the United States. It has, especially in this moment, an international importance. Now, I want to say that my motivation is to help to catalyze an international mobilization to end the Ukraine war with a diplomatic solution. Because the one thing which we absolutely cannot afford, and the world cannot afford, would be a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia, which, given the strategic partnership between Russia and China, would immediately be a confrontation between NATO and Russia and China and be a world war. And that would be instantly, or in a very short time, the annihilation of the human species. And we better remind ourselves of the words of John F. Kennedy, who said, the people who die in a nuclear war first will be the lucky ones, because those who will die then maybe months or even years later in a nuclear winter, when, which is estimated to be about 10 years, and nothing will grow anymore, and people will starve to death if they haven't died of nuclear fallout consequences before. That is what we are looking at. We are looking at the potential annihilation of the human species. And, there are some people who know what nuclear war is, mostly older people. We have found in the recent mobilization that many young people have no inkling what a nuclear war is. And fortunately, we have Stephen Starr, who will speak about that again, help to get people really aware of that. We are looking at the end of mankind. That is what this danger implies. And we are moving right now so quickly towards an escalation that we have, a couple of weeks ago, very gladly picked up on an offer by Pope Francis, who said that he will offer the venue of the Vatican as a place for peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia without any precondition. And this is very important, because the only chance to come to a diplomatic settlement would be to start totally fresh without preconditions. Now, we have engaged in the letter writing campaign. In the meantime, we have more than 100 VIPs from, I think, 37 countries so far. We ask you to sign that letter to the Pope that he sees that there is some support for this campaign. and then have, make an international pressure on the United States, on the other NATO countries, that the population does not agree. And frankly, I think that at this point, the only thing which will help to stop this is if you see around the world millions of people in the streets. And as you know, we are very, very far from that. Now, one of the things which is absolutely mind-boggling and actually scary is to see how the political class in the United States and in most European countries, they forget everything. They forget what they said only less than a year ago. For example, Bundeskanzler, Chancellor Scholz from Germany in February, shortly after the war in the Ukraine started, he said, we can absolutely not send heavy weapons to Ukraine because that has the danger of leading to World War III. And if you look at what has happened since, basically step by step, more weapons have been sent. It went from, just all kinds of weapon systems to now we are already at light tanks. The demand to send Leopard 2 tech tanks, fighter tanks is mounting. And, in the meantime, the United States and the British and even Germany right now are training Ukrainian troops outside of Ukraine. There are reports by French journalists that US military is very much present inside Ukraine. And, just the recent development where Macron sent last Wednesday AMX 10 RC light tanks. These are old tanks. They come from the 80s. And as military experts in France told me, these are basically a reflection that the Ukrainians are meant to be cannon fodder because they don't give a very decisive margin of superiority to the Ukrainians. And, now the Germans immediately after Scholz spoke with Biden, they are sending the Marder light tanks. The US sends Bradley tanks. And, basically already that was denounced by Russia as being a major escalation. Also, there were 3 times already deep into Russian territory, drone attacks. It's not clear exactly from where they came, but that means also, a major escalation if the, war moves inside Russia. And, yesterday, just shortly after the decision of the German and the French and American tanks was becoming known, former President Medvedev, who is now the head of a military commission which coordinates all of these military activities, he sent out a message on the Telegram channel in a language which makes your hair rising. He basically said, he used language like Nazis come, which has grown in the West, making such decisions. And then he announced that as of beginning of this year, the Zircon hypersonic missiles have been deployed in front of the coasts of the NATO countries, and that some of them would be close to the Potomac River. That's 100 kilometers away from the coast. Naturally, that's Washington. And we had a previous report that these hypersonic missiles, which are 9 Mach and highly maneuverable, there is no missile defense system which protects against them, that basically they are so quickly coming, let's say, if they are in front of Washington somewhere in the Atlantic coast, that the US president would not even have the time to enter Air Force One. And, other reports were that all US cities would be nuclear contaminated within a very short period of time. Now, that is not all decisive because, you have an incredible war deployment and in a certain sense, if this goes, then, we are looking at Armageddon. Now, let's look at how we got to this situation. In the meantime, because of the war propaganda, and because, in times of war, there is black propaganda, gray propaganda, and, it's now an effort to basically muscle all discussion, that you are not allowed anymore to say that there is a prehistory which led to this. If you say that the world history started on February 23rd, you are already a Putin agent. There is a new action plan by the EU Commission, an action plan against disinformation, which starts with the very nice sentence that naturally the freedom of expression is a guaranteed civil rights. But then the long text afterwards basically says that anything you are saying is regarded as coming from Russian trolls and makes you a Putin agent. But the reality is this war did not start on the 24th of April. It was not an unprovoked military aggression by Putin. And it is also a complete lie to say that, if the Ukrainians are not winning on the battlefield, then Putin will take over all of Europe. I mean, it has reached a degree of hysteria which is unbelievable. This war started with the idea that the Anglo-Americans, led by the British and the neocons, decided to create an unipolar world at the time when the Soviet Union disintegrated. And the whole problem is because they are intending to keep this unipolar world, despite the fact that it long has gone. It no longer exists. But basically, because of the policies which were called the PNAC, the Project of a New American Century, which was based on the special relationship between Great Britain and the United States. There were 5 NATO expansions. You had the color revolutions. You had the policy of regime change. And the idea was from the beginning, from 91, probably earlier, but 91, there was a study of the CIA which said that Russia had to be prevented from developing economically because it had more strategic resources than the United States. It had better skilled labor power. And therefore, if they would have access to scientific and technological progress and diversify from oil and gas, then they would become a competitor on the world market, and that had to be prevented by all means. That policy existed in 91. It was continuously the basis of the policy. The West could live with Yeltsin as long as he was there because he was happily selling out Russia, leading to an absolute demographic collapse of Russia losing 1 million people per year. And it really became completely different when Putin became president, and especially when he returned as president and was moving to reinstall Russia as a world player. And that is the whole point. Now, China has come, the rise of China has come as an additional factor, but the idea of an unipolar world is what is behind this war danger. So I cannot go at this point for time reasons into the whole history, but another major stepping stone was the Maidan coup in 2014. It did not start with Russia annexing the Crimea, which is always said. It started, this phase of the escalation started with the EU association agreement, which Yanukovych in the last moment realized he could not sign because it would have given EU products free access to the Russian market. And that was economically absolutely not acceptable. And it would have given NATO access to the Black Sea. So when Yanukovych backed out of that, you had the Maidan coup, which, Nuland Brecht was financed with $5 billion, or the prehistory of it was financed with $5 billion the Maidan coup was heavily infested with Bandera forces. I mean, that is to deny that that existed is just absolutely ludicrous. And, you know, it was really then the coup in Kiev, which forbid Russian language, which, you know, that's why the people in Crimea made a referendum and decided to be part of Russia. So, the last straw was basically when now Merkel first, and then the former president of France, Hollande, in whatever reason, said that they agreed to the Minsk agreement only to give Ukraine time to build up its military force and become strong enough. Now, I have my doubts of why these people are saying this. You know, one has to look at it very carefully, that the Minsk 1 and Minsk 2 were in a very difficult situation. And it could be that both France and Germany meant it seriously when they agreed in the Normandy agreement to, you know, basically find a solution to the East Ukraine situation. It can be that Merkel, for sure, because she made the incredibly stupid mistake to leave nuclear energy without having a replacement. So naturally, Germany was dependent on Russian gas. Now, it can be that she was just trying to be in good faith with NATO now and says, I didn't mean it seriously. I tried to cheat on Putin the whole time. It can be that Hollande has very stupid domestic reasons. I can go through that if required also. In any case, it was the most idiotic. If it's true, it was the biggest betrayal. If it's just a cover story, it's the most idiotic stupidity. The result of it is that the Russians and Putin and Lavrov and others have said correctly that, you know, if the West is lying like that, what can you believe them? Is there ever again going to be any word worth anything? And if we would come to a situation where we have to discuss a new world system, what is their word worth? So the trust is zero. And, you know, that is where we are at right now. Now, I should mention that, you know, you have a development which most people in the West have almost no inkling of, and that is that the continuous policy of sanctions against Russia has led to an enormous blowback. The fact that the seizure of $300 billion worth of Russian assets, the weaponization of the dollar, and the sanctions and similar things have led to a blowback whereby many countries in the world, the majority of the global South, are now moving to form an alternative system because they think that a de-dollarization is the only way how they can survive. Now you have, as a result of all of these policies by the West, the trust in Europe is zilch. The fear of the United States is big, but the wish to survive on the part of the majority of the countries of the global South is even bigger than that. So right now you have a complete realignment in the world. You have, especially with the election of Lula, in Brazil, the majority of Latin American countries want to work with the BRICS. The BRICS have now 17 requests for memberships from Argentina, from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia, from many other countries, Indonesia, 17, and they represent the vast majority of the world population. You have right now the BRICS Plus, the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union, and many organizations and countries from Africa, Latin America, and Asia who are in the process of forming a new economic system. Now, it is my absolute conviction that the only way how we will get out of this war situation, first of all, we have to stop the war in Ukraine. We have to, basically have a diplomatic solution. That is why the Vatican initiative must step in the short term. But then we need to think, how do we get out of this? And now I think absolutely, as long as we stay in the realm of geopolitics, even, the formation of another organization, like I described it with the BRICS Plus, is not sufficient, because if the United States and Europe are determined to prevent that from happening, war will be the consequences. And therefore, I think we have to go back to the Peace of Westphalia idea that we need a new international security and development architecture, which takes into account the security interest of every single country on the planet, and that includes emphatically Russia, China, the United States, and also Iran, North Korea, and whatever other country may be in question. And then we need to have a new paradigm, a paradigm which starts with the sovereignty of every country, because sovereignty is a precondition for the participation of the individual in the self-government process. We need to concentrate on the vast problems of mankind, eliminate poverty and hunger. 2 billion people are in danger of starvation. We need to have a health system which allows people to have a full life and not die prematurely. We need universal education. We need a credit system, because the financial system of the neoliberal system is about to blow out. We are with the central banks between a rock and a hard place. If they fight inflation by moving from many years of quantitative easing to quantitative tightening, you have the danger of a mass collapse of bankruptcies, triggering a collapse or a hyperinflationary blowout. But there is no third way. That's why we need Glass-Steagall. We need a new credit system. We need a national bank in every country. And we need to invest in higher energy flux density production to increase the productivity of the world economy to accommodate all people living on this planet. I have written 10 principles for this to be discussed. The 10th principle, I think, is the most important. It is the idea that man is good, his nature is good, and that all evil in the world comes from a lack of development and therefore can be overcome. And I would encourage everybody to join in a discussion about how do we get out of this, because to stop the war is the first step. But are we creative human beings who can decide what is the order, how we can live together in the 21st century and hopefully the many millennia beyond? So I would like you to join this movement. We are going to try to build up more resistance to this war. And therefore, I am very happy that Diane is announcing her campaign. Thank you.